The Biden crime family and whistleblowers have come forward. So what did they say? It's our two-part series from Washington, D.C. It's Verdict with Senator Ted Cruz. Senator, it's like midnight. Whistleblowers have talked today, and we're sitting here with Congressman James Comer, our guest for a two-part series. This is probably going to be one of my favorite episodes that we've ever done. And we're going to go in order of how we got to these whistleblowers. But before we even get to that, you and I talked, we're pulling an audible before the show. We're going to find out exactly what those whistleblowers said today in front of the committee with Congressman Comer.
Well, Ben, let me welcome you to Washington, D.C.
It's good to be here.
It is almost midnight. You're out of Texas. You're out of Memphis.
That's right.
You are in the swamp. You are in the depth. So my friend James Comer, Congressman from the great state of Kentucky, chairman of the House Oversight Committee, has been deep up personal with Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and the Biden crime family. And I got to say, when we started using that phrase, Biden crime family, I thought it was too harsh. I was like a little hesitant. Okay, that seems hyperbolic. I got to say, every damn day that unfolds, that's less and less exaggeration.
Yeah.
And so James has been, the reason we're starting so late is he's been voting till 11 o'clock at night. So he just left the House floor. This is the reality of Washington.
Right.
And today, this is going to air on Thursday, but today, Wednesday, as we're sitting here almost midnight, you had a hearing in the House of Representatives that was a big, big deal. You had two groundbreaking whistleblowers. And so I just want to start by asking what happened today. If someone's busy, they're driving to work, it's Thursday morning, they're driving to work, they didn't have time to turn on the TV yesterday, they didn't watch the testimony, so what did they miss? What happened in the House of Representatives on Wednesday?
Well, I think we had a very substantive hearing on a very serious subject. The subject was the Biden criminal activity, and the two witnesses we had were, I think, the most credible witnesses we've had in front of the Oversight Committee in the entire 7 years I've been in Congress. These were the two highest-ranking IRS career employees from the International Tax Crime Division. So these were the guys that investigate all the suspicious wires, all the foreign influence, any type of tax evasion from foreign entities, the influx of illegal Chinese money. These are the guys that do that. And they're part of an elite team, and there are only 12 on this team. So
wow.
this was two of the 12, 1/6 of the entire international tax fraud team for the IRS. And what they had to say was very concerning, because I never knew over the past 6 months whether or not the IRS even knew about the shell companies that the Bidens had, if they even knew about all the suspicious activity reports that Treasury had that showed that the Bidens were laundering money through shell companies, through various banks. Pretty serious accusation. We've been talking about this, and the Democrats have said, well, there's no evidence, that's not true, that's fake news, Russian disinformation. So we finally had two whistleblowers come forward. They gave a transcribed interview to the Ways and Means Committee, which is the appropriate process. They're the ones, as you know, in the House that has jurisdiction over the IRS. Then they agreed to come to a committee hearing for the House Oversight Committee. So the American people got to see today a 6-hour hearing with 50 members of Congress, each having 6 minutes to ask these IRS whistleblowers questions. And there were substantive questions on the Republican side. Now, the Democrats, all they thought about was Trump and racism and things like that. But we asked very substantive questions. And what we learned was that the Bidens have committed a series of crimes. There were many more tax evasion issues than what Hunter Biden pled guilty to. The IRS whistleblowers had investigated this for 5 years, and they were told to stand down by the Department of Justice. And what happened is they took so long, they let a lot of the statutes of limitations expire, to where the penalties that the Bidens were going to have to plead guilty to kept shrinking and shrinking and shrinking until there was nothing left.
And so, Hunter serving zero jail time.
That's right, 0 jail time. Anyone else in America would already be in prison for the amount of money they evaded.
All right, so let's start at an initial point. These two whistleblowers, look, an initial assessment you've got to make, the House of Representatives has to make. if we see an impeachment trial the Senate has to make, and ultimately the American people have to make, is are these guys credible? Are they telling the truth? If they're lying, that's not very persuasive. And so if you're trying to assess, all right, are these credible witnesses, one of the questions you ask is, do they have a bias? You know, if you have a witness who is, say, a disgruntled employee that got fired, sometimes they make up all sorts of crazy stories. If you have a witness who's a partisan, maybe they're you know, a hardcore Republican, they hate Joe Biden, so they'll come in and testify to something nasty because they've got a political bias. So one of the things that I think is striking is that both of these guys, they're career IRS employees. They've spent their entire professional life working at the IRS. They're both Democrats. Neither of them are partisan Republicans. I don't know if anyone asked today, but I suspect neither of them voted for Donald Trump.
I think that's a good suspicion.
You know, they've said they're Democrats. They've identified as Democrats. The number of career IRS employees who are Democrats who voted for Donald Trump, if that's not zero, it's pretty darn close.
Very close.
So that suggests there's not a reason on the face to doubt what they're saying. They still might be lying. You've got to test what they're saying. Anyone that comes forward with serious allegations of criminality, and to be clear, what they've alleged is criminality by Hunter Biden. But look, if we were just talking about Hunter Biden, he is a troubled soul. He has substance abuse issues. If it were just Hunter Biden, this wouldn't be national news. But they're also alleging criminal conduct by Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the United States under Joe Biden, and they are ultimately alleging criminal conduct by Joe Biden, the sitting president of the United States.
They were, and they were headed towards Joe. They wanted to interview Hunter. They wanted to interview Joe Biden's grandchildren. When
you say they, so people understand, who is they?
They is
who are the two witnesses?
There were more than two. There were 7 that were set to interview Hunter Biden and his children.
So they had a plan in place.
They had a plan. It was IRS employees as well as FBI employees.
So were they working together or separately?
They were working together.
So they all come together. They'd all agree that they should be interviewed.
They've gotten to the point to where we need to knock on his door and say, hey, where is all this? What's the source of this money? What did you do to receive this money from our enemies?
You said we're going to knock on his door. One of the things that I found really stunning is what the testimony was, that they're getting ready to knock on Hunter Biden's door. And if you're doing an investigation, you go knock on a suspect's door, you want to interview them, you want to catch them off guard. You want to get them to say something they're not expecting, like you want them to get them to say something stupid. Because the sad thing is criminals really are stupid. They say all sorts of dumb things. So what did the whistleblowers tell us happened that is unusual when they're getting ready to knock on Hunter's door?
The Secret Service, because at the time they were going to knock on Hunter's door, was at the point where Joe Biden had just gotten elected president. So he had Secret Service protection and he had the transition team. The Secret Service was notified that Hunter Biden was about to be approached by IRS and FBI employees. And then the Biden transition team was approached. Then the Biden lawyers called Hunter Biden, and then they called the FBI agents and the IRS agents and said, don't knock on that door. If he wants to come out, he'll come out and talk to you. Just wait. Well, they waited and nothing ever happened, and then they were told to go home.
So they were there at his house.
They were there at his house.
So and let me underscore, the Department of Justice tipped off Hunter. Hey, they're coming to question you. And Hunter called in his lawyers and they said, don't talk to him.
Don't go outside.
Like, in any other circumstance, if you're investigating criminal conduct, do you tip off the suspect beforehand?
And they said that today, no. They said that had never happened in their decade-long service to the IRS.
When they were told to go home, who told them to go home?
Their superior at the IRS.
Was that unprecedented from their testimony?
They said it never happened before.
All right, you talked about suspicious activity reports. And there's been some discussion of this. Look, if you're at home, you're watching TV, you're trying to figure out what these are. What is a suspicious activity report, and like, when is it made? When does it occur?
I knew a lot about these because I was a director of a bank for over a decade. A suspicious activity report is when the bank files notice with the Treasury Cabinet that they suspect their client has committed a crime. Doesn't mean they committed a crime. They have a strong suspicion that a crime was committed, so it's to protect the bank as well.
So how frequently do these things happen?
Very seldom, despite what the Washington Post, or in their defense of the Biden, they say, well, everybody has a suspicious activity report. That is baloney. I was on a bank board for 10 years. I think we issued 2 over the course of 10 years.
And how many were issued concerning Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and the Biden family?
Over 170. They were direct.
Wait, you were at a bank and they issued 2 in 10
how many years?
If you had 2 SARs, they're called SARs in the banking industry. If you had 2 SARs against you, it would be hard for you to open an account somewhere. There wouldn't be any bank that would want to have you as a customer because it's not worth the paperwork. Remember, when the bank files one of these, you could understand this, appreciate this, Senator. That's inviting the regulators to come in and regulate. Okay, that's the last thing the banks want.
170 get filed. That means that somebody's getting a deposit in their account. It's a big amount. It's from somewhere suspicious. I mean, what triggers it? Why? You're a banker. What is it that makes you say we got to file a SAR?
A large transaction that comes out of the blue. So
and what's large? So, what is there a threshold?
You had $1 million. I'll use the Robinson Walker account because we subpoenaed. That was the first bank account we subpoenaed.
Now, who's Robinson Walker?
Rob Walker was one of the associates that they used to funnel money from China and Romania and then down and launder it down to the Biden.
So he's a guy that's doing business with Hunter and Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't know what that business is, but they got a $3 million wire from China. So
one wire, $3 million.
$3 million. Now remember, we got the bank records for 10 years. That bank account never had.
You ever gotten a $3 million wire?
No, but I want one.
Well, this is
not right. Yeah, okay.
Can you call the Chinese? Look, Ben is a charming guy, and he would like $3 million. He's not going to do a damn thing.
No, you don't have to work for $3 million apparently.
So this account never had much activity in it over the course of 10 years. Maintained around a $40,000 or $50,000 balance. Then one day, out of the blue, they get a $3 million wire from China.
And so their bank says this is weird.
Yes.
And it's coming from China. Like on the face of it, it's a wire.
It's coming from China.
Yeah, and he'd never gotten a foreign wire before. And there's $3 million in an account that's never had more than $50,000. Some months, it had $10,000 balance, but never more than $50,000. Then all of a sudden, a $3 million wire.
And then what happens to that $3 million when it lands?
24 hours later, because that's the minimum amount of time you can. You have to have a deposit in the bank for at least.
Like the wire
hours.
needs to clear.
Yeah, it needs to clear.
Yeah.
24 hours and 2 minutes later, he starts.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Like really,
yes,
24 hours and 2 minutes?
Yes. Maybe an hour. Give me an hour. And
all right.
It was more than 2 minutes. It was like 56 minutes.
Okay, 19 Pinocchios because you added 50 minutes to it.
So,
but it's just after 24 hours.
Just after 24 hours. The next day, they start wiring incremental payments to different Biden shell companies.
So how many Biden shell companies
And you know what that's called? When you set up a bunch of shell companies for the sole purpose to launder money, that's called racketeering.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to ask you, I call these dumb questions, but they're important questions for people that understand this works.
And I'll intervene. Look, one of the great things about this podcast, we try to ask lots of dumb questions.
Yes.
And I'll tell you, James, actually, the sort of vision for this podcast, we launched it 4 years ago. We launched this podcast on the first night of the very first Donald Trump impeachment. Mm-hmm. And that night, we started actually at midnight. We're reliving our origins because I left the Senate floor from the trial of the Trump impeachment and I went to a studio and we recorded verdict. And I remember the first few times we did it, we'd get into things and our early production team, they said, okay, Ted, you're getting too complicated. This is too detailed. And they said, dumb it down. And I said, look, people don't want dumbed down. People are smart. They care about it. Now, what they do want is understandable. And here's the analogy I've used a bunch of times. If you have a terrible disease, you go to the doctor. Mm-hmm. You don't want the doctor to tell you, James, you got a boo-boo. Mm-hmm. Like, you want the doctor, if I got a problem, tell me what the heck's, like, what's going on, Doc?
Agree.
But you don't want them to talk to you in a way that you need like a medical degree and expertise. Mm-hmm. So what we try to do, and what Ben is doing asking dumb questions, is to say, okay, we keep hearing about suspicious activity reports. What is that? Mm-hmm. like a shell company. What is a shell company?
Yeah, explain.
You hear shell company, and like, what does that mean for some?
And explain the shell companies connecting to money laundering, how those two come together. Because a lot of people that hear this, but they don't understand why you need so many of them, and why you would siphon money into multiple shell companies.
I come from the banking background, and I speak
but this is people want to know this.
For me, I mean, it has a double-edged sword there, but a shell company is a fake company. Okay. It's a company that...
So it's not a real business. It's not making widgets.
They don't make anything. They don't produce anything. They don't provide a good or service.
Okay.
They're just...
It's just a corporate entity that's created on paper.
We could go to the Texas or Kentucky Secretary of State and file a company in 2 minutes that says Cruz and Comer Energy Company. But that doesn't mean we have an energy company. We just have an LLC, limited liability company, that says we're a energy company. So they just create these fake companies.
And how many are we talking about?
20.
20?
20.
So 20 different Biden fake companies. They don't have factories.
No.
They don't have machinery.
They don't
have
real
products.
Estate.
They don't own real
have a
estate.
website. They don't have a business card. They don't
so
have
they're
employees.
20 companies.
They don't have a storefront. They have nothing.
Okay. They're just...
So that's where the laundering...
Yes.
So explain how you launder money and how that works.
Money laundering is hiding money. You're hiding the source of the money, and you're deceiving the Internal Revenue Service to try to evade taxes. So if the Hunter Biden was doing something legitimate for China, they could have just wired the money to Hunter Biden, but they didn't. They sent it to a company called Robinson Walker. Then they wired it to a company called Owasco. Then they wired it to another company called Bohe something or another. And then they start
And
monthly.
do these companies do anything with it?
Nothing.
Or they're just it's just like a bucket to pour the water in, then you pour it in another place and pour it somewhere else.
That's exactly what it is. And it was organized. This is like organized crime. This was very organized.
So how did you unwind this? So you're sitting there doing a congressional investigation. If they're trying to hide it, presumably they make it hard to figure out. So what enabled you to 20 shell companies? How do you figure this out and connect the dots?
Well, we had a good start. Your colleagues, Grassley and Johnson, had done a report. Miranda Devine had written a book. There were several good reporters that have been investigating on this for a long time. We took pieces of that, and then when I became chairman and got subpoena power, then I was able to actually subpoena bank records. And
the banks cooperated.
Most of the banks have cooperated. It's getting harder because here's what happened. Everyone on cable news, some people that I don't think are as smart a legal mind as you, Ted, we're giving me lots of advice on what to do. The first thing they need to do on day one is subpoena Hunter and Joe Biden. I didn't do that, and I think that would have been a huge mistake. I think that's what they thought I would do. If I had done that, it would have ended up in court. Then if I had subpoenaed some of these bank accounts, the bank would have said, we can't give that to you because there's ongoing litigation.
Right.
So what we did on day one,
started by gathering evidence.
We started by subpoenaing bank records for shell accounts. Now, some of these companies had been abandoned because they never were real companies.
Yeah, they never sold anything, never did anything.
They just used them to hide the money they were getting from China and Romania and Ukraine. So those bank accounts...
So let me stop you real quick. Are those the three countries that are involved?
So far.
China, Romania, and Ukraine. But all three of them, you've got payments from China, from Romania, and Ukraine going to Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, or the Biden family. Is that right?
Not to Joe Biden yet, but to everyone else in the Biden family.
How many Bidens have you identified that have gotten money so far?
9, and I think
when you say identify,
yeah, what's the
what's the criteria?
9, I've heard the number 12. So what's the why?
We
9,
actually
why
have 9.
So you proved 9.
We've proved 9. I would bet a lot of money. If I were on the craps table, I would put odds behind 3 more members of the family.
When you say there's 9.
The reason
is that 9?
We haven't gone after the brother yet. And
by the way, the brother's Jim. That's Joe's
Jim
brother.
and Frank. Don't forget about Frank.
I had forgotten about Frank.
Yeah.
Okay, so I hear about Jim. All right, so Joe has 2 brothers?
2 brothers.
And so I got to say, one of the things I've wondered, in fact, I was having dinner with some folks tonight who asked me, they said, okay, Hunter's been indicted. What about Jim? Like, what about Jim?
Yeah.
Jim was the big dog of this entity before Hunter Biden came along, correct?
You know why Jim's not in the news right now, he didn't leave a laptop laying around. But I'll tell you what Jim has done. He's in court in about 4 or 5 different states being sued by former partners for fraud.
Really?
Yes.
Why has that not been covered?
Well, you tell me. So we'll get to the point to where we'll start subpoenaing his bank records. I think some of these cases, part of the reason we can't get it because he's in litigation.
All right, the 9 or 12, you've got Hunter, you've got Jim and Frank, that's 3. Who are we talking about as the rest? Who are the other players?
The other players are Frank's wife.
So Frank's wife.
And we believe that Jim's got family members too that may have received wires. And then, ultimately, with Joe, I suspect there are offshore accounts. And we kind of learned that today. One of the last questions.
So what's the evidence of offshore accounts that you learned today?
There are, the IRS whistleblowers confirmed when I asked if they had documents pertaining to foreign accounts, and they said they did.
Wow.
But they couldn't turn them over to us. They have to go through that process and turn it over to the Ways and Means Committee, and I requested they do that, and they said they would.
So the $3 million that you saw transferred in, you said that got transferred out. Where all did it go?
So Rob Walker kept a third of it. There was another guy.
That's a good business partnership, right?
$1 million.
You help launder money. You don't do anything.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not sure.
And you get a third.
I'm not sure the exact pricing on that, but I think that's better than pimp scheme.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
but
that's
I
good.
don't think they take a third.
Somebody else got a third. Then the Bidens got 1.3 million of the 3 million.
And 1.3 to different Biden family members.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's just from one
That particular
payment.
transaction went to 4 different Biden family members.
So that was one suspicious
That was
activity
one.
report.
One.
And there's 100 and how many?
169 more. Plus, just because, those were suspicious activity reports that were created by Joe or Hunter Biden. Then they were the subject of another 100 suspicious activity reports.
So that's 270 if you're counting individually.
At least.
So if you're the Treasury Department, because Treasury is getting these SARs.
Yes.
What do they do with the SAR? Just generally speaking,
They're supposed to turn it over to the IRS investigators, which they knew about the SAR. So that part of the equation worked. Somehow the IRS whistleblowers knew about the suspicious activity report.
All right, I ask these questions because this is complicated for a lot of people. So normal course of business, a bank fills out a SARS report. Walk what normal is compared to what actually happened with them.
Normally, I don't know of anybody that's ever gotten more than 2 or 3. You're talking about the president's immediate family that got over 170, right? Normally, and here's what the suspicious activity report said. I've had access and I've read them all at Treasury. They said they suspected they were money laundering. They suspected they had...
and this is from multiple banks. It's not just one.
Multiple banks. Banks you've heard of. J.P. Morgan, Wells Fargo, U.S. Bank. These are Bank of
Big
America.
banks.
Big
These
banks.
are serious banks with real lawyers that know what they're doing.
And they knew who they were. They said this is a politically exposed person. They suspected some of these wires were coming from state-owned entities. They said that from some of the China...
Okay, so you're going to have to explain that, what that means.
The communist government is sending the money.
Yes. According to J.P. Morgan.
And the whistleblower in that scenario is the bank who's saying that.
The whistleblower
So
is the
J.P.
bank.
Morgan is saying, we believe...
J.P. Morgan, Wells Fargo, Bank of America.
So they write this suspicious activity
and by the
report.
way, like all of those banks, J.P. Morgan, their CEO, Jamie Dimon, is a prominent Democrat.
Right.
I mean, none of these banks are Republicans. None of these banks have it out for the Bidens.
We've lost Wall Street. They're all Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, that's not... So these are all banks that are reliable political donors to the Democrats that are nonetheless looking at reports saying, wow, this is really concerning.
But they're writing in the report. I'm in shock by this. You've seen a lot more of this stuff in the legal world than I have. I'm genuinely in shock right now, the fact that you're telling me that an American bank is writing that we believe a wire transfer coming into the Biden family is coming from the Chinese Communist government, not an entity.
It's money laundering.
It's money, and we're saying it's money laundering on top of it coming from the Chinese Communist government. Is that the moment when you said, holy crap?
Yeah. Wire fraud, tax fraud, money laundering.
So they're naming all the things
Everything.
they think.
All right, so then Treasury reports it to IRS. They begin investigating. When did they open the investigation to Hunter Biden?
2018. I know they were investigating in 2018. It could have been earlier.
So at least 5 years.
Yes.
Now, this investigation, look, if it's been at least 5 years, that they just announced an indictment weeks ago. Mm-hmm. That's a long time. What took them 5 years?
They were stonewalled the whole time. They said they couldn't do it. They were ready to go at the 2020 election, and they were told by the Deputy U.S. Attorney Wolf in Delaware, oh, the optics are bad, we can't do this before an election. And they told them to stand down, and then once Joe Biden
So it's DOJ that was stonewalling them?
Yes.
All right. So a number of the potential offenses that Hunter Biden committed, the statute of limitations is run on.
Yes.
The most serious tax crimes he's committed, statute of limitations is run on. Why? What happened?
Because they were told to wait. They couldn't do it because of the election. Then once he became president, they're like, well, we don't need to do this. You have to understand this. This is what they said today. They knew that Hunter Biden committed a bunch of crimes. They felt like all roads were leading to Joe Biden. And that's what was making the Department of Justice nervous, because they
weren't idiots. They knew
They didn't feel they were that concerned about Hunter Biden. It's just they were worried, okay, what's he doing to get this money? There's no legitimate business here. It has to be something his father's done. And good God, he's the President of the United States now. We don't want to go through that.
Can you explain statute of limitations? A lot of people, it sounds normal legal rule, but I think it's important that we explain this. When you have a 5-year window, as it's described, right? You've got 5 years on some of these crimes that you have 5 years to basically charge someone with that crime.
Right.
Once you're outside that 5 years, you cannot charge them for that crime, even if you know they committed the crime.
That's right.
And look, a statute of limitations is really important. You know, if you were in high school and you knocked off a liquor store, I'm not saying you did, I'm not saying you didn't.
Yeah.
But if you did in high school.
I did not.
Notice how quickly.
Yeah.
But even if you did, there's a statute of limitations. The idea is you shouldn't have to face the possibility for criminal prosecution 5, 10, 20 years after something happened. Because if someone charged you with something you did 20 years ago, and by the way, it's more than 20 years ago, you were in high school.
Yeah.
Just to
I know, I'm getting old. I know, I'm getting old.
But look, if someone charged you, how would you defend yourself?
Yeah.
Like, you don't have any evidence from 20 years. Part of the reason of a statute of limitations is that it's impossible to defend yourself from something so long ago. There are no witnesses, there are no records. So the idea is if you commit a crime, there's a period of time for which you're liable. But it also means if you get past the statute of limitations, you can't prosecute. And
prosecutors know the statute of limitations.
It is critical, and you focus on.
And these guys knew it. They knew it was getting close, and they were still told to stand down.
All right. So the most important thing that I heard James say is that the investigation all understood that the real focus of the criminality was Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And that they wanted to investigate Joe Biden.
Hunter really wasn't important.
And that the Department of Justice blocked them, interfered, obstructed with their going after Joe Biden. That's a big damn deal. And you know what? If you want to hear more about that, this is a 2-part series. You got to listen tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to do the second half, which is Joe Biden's direct criminal liability and how the Department of Justice obstructed justice, covered it up, blocked the investigation. We're going to do that interview right now.
And make sure that you share this, because this is why we're doing this. People need to take this, put it on social media. It's on Facebook. It's on YouTube. If you're listening to the podcast, share that as well so that everybody knows what's going on. This is what the media is not covering. Make this go viral.
Well, and ask yourself, have you heard this on TV? Have you read about this in the paper? Has anyone explained what a suspicious activity report is? Has anyone explained how strange it is that there are 170 of them? This podcast exists to give you the facts that you can't get watching TV news. You can't get reading the newspaper. So share this, like it, get others to watch it, and watch part 2 that's coming out tomorrow.